I think maybe we can start now.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our webinar on the Annual Report 2025 on the cost of a bad payment culture, EU trends and solutions. My name is Tania Fraser-Nunes. I am a legal and policy officer at DG Grow, where I'm responsible for late payments, and I'll be your moderator today. I think all of us reunited here today know that late payments is a very serious issue, and it has severe consequences in the growth of our companies. And in the world we live in today, it becomes more and more important to have a fully functioning internal market where companies can strive. However, we do know that the problem of late payments is persisting. And in today's session, so both the presentation and a panel will discuss and show that there's actually been a worsening of the situation. We have more companies indicating that they face issues due to late payments. Payment terms and payment periods are still very long, and they have been increasing, especially for G2B. And then we have companies that delay their own payments because they are paid late. And this all amounts to a very complicated situation. But it is due to work that is being done by the observatory that we are able to see these trends and then also understand what's happening and act accordingly. So to discuss all these findings, we have today for you a very interesting program. So first there will be the presentation of the Annual Report 2025, followed then by a panel discussion. Just in terms of logistics, this session will be recorded and then posted in YouTube. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A, and we will then try to address them as much as possible. So we will start today with Dr. Cinzia Alcidini, that will shed some light on the latest findings of the EU Late Payment Observatory. Dr. Cinzia is a senior research fellow at CEPS in Brussels, where she is also head of the Economic Policy Unit and the Jobs and Skills Unit. She is a macroeconomist by training, and she's currently a guest lecturer at the University of Ghent and a member of the Joint Board of Studies of the Economics of Globalization and European Integration Erasmus Mundus master degree. She's member of the editorial board of Intereconomics and editor of Applied Economics Quarterly, and she holds a PhD degree in international economics from the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies from Geneva, Switzerland. She also holds a doctorate in statistical and mathematical methods applied to economics and social sciences from the University of Perugia in Italy. So without further ado, Cinzia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Tania, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. It has become now an annual appointment to share the findings of the annual report of the observatory. So I'm really pleased to share some insights with you. Let me share my screen with the presentation. Okay. Can you probably see my screen? Okay, I'll go in.
You need to put it in presentation mode, I think.
Okay. Does it work now?
No.
You went
No.
on.
Now we lost the presentation.
I was kicked out. Let me try again. Sorry for this. Okay, screen 2. Let me try this.
Yes. And now you can put in presentation mode.
Yeah. Does it work?
Otherwise, like this also works. Yes.
You have the smallest, the different screens, or just
Yes.
the full screen?
No, it works. Yeah.
It's two screens. Yeah.
We see two screens, actually, yes.
Okay. Now it should work.
Yes,
Right?
now it's perfect. Yes.
Okay. Sorry for the technical issues. Let's just go through the main findings of the annual report. The first point to highlight was already anticipated by Tania, and is about payment performance. And basically what we observed in the data of 2024, which is what is reported in the last report, is basically an increase in the percentage of companies indicating that they have been facing issues due to late payment. And basically we are now above 50% of reporting companies. As you can see, there has been an increase in trend after a couple of years of improvement in the situation around COVID, most likely due to support measures offered to companies, liquidity support measures, and then again a deterioration. And basically 2024 appears the worst year among the 6 for which we have been collecting data. The second interesting finding about payment performance relates to both payment times and payment terms. And basically here what we observe is that the situation has slightly improved for business to business with a slight decline both in payment periods and in payment terms, while the situation has deteriorated for G2B, something which is not necessarily very encouraging. When it comes to payment terms, another interesting aspect that we could report this year, thanks to the fact that we had the possibility to have additional data through a new survey. The European Commission helped us to have additional data on late payments through the SME panel survey, where we could actually ask a participant their views about imposing limits on payment terms. And basically, a key finding is that on average, about 2/3 of the companies and business associations who responded expressed preference for having payment limits. You can see that there is a difference between those who would like a firm payment terms for all companies and those who would prefer to have sector-specific flexibility allowed. But there is quite a strong majority going in this direction, with business association actually being even more supporting than companies. A second finding relates to specificity of companies and in particular size and sectors. And we are now been conducting this, presenting this report for 3 years, and there is a funding which is really systematic across time and relates to the size. And in particular, the fact that the larger the company, the less likely it is to settle its invoice on time. So we really see that there is a difference between in the behavior of small and larger companies. So small companies really tend to pay on time much more than big companies. But it is for these companies that actually late payment is the greatest issue, as you can see from the bar chart at the bottom on the right. When it comes to sectors, it is the picture is much more heterogeneous, and we have sectors actually who pays quite well in some countries and much less in other countries. So somehow it's very difficult to find a systematic sectoral culture of payments. What is much more clear is a country differences when it comes to payment culture. Another aspect that was that we looked at this year, it was trying to understand the drivers of late payment. And quite a lot of emphasis actually has been on cyclical factors. I think this will be emphasized by other speakers as well. But the concerns mostly related to the economic environment, but also that the geopolitical landscape seems to have affected companies' perception about issues related to late payment. And basically, more than half of the companies indicated that they find increasingly difficult to pay their suppliers on time. More than half are concerned about the fact that their clients won't be able to pay in due time. And more than half of the companies surveyed actually reported that they have accepted longer payment terms that they are comfortable with. So in this sense, the macroeconomic context and the cyclical factors seemed to have been quite relevant in 2024. And this is a concern, generally speaking, but also because we know that late payment very often have cascade effect. And basically, companies that are faced with late payments, they often tend to pay it late. And this is basically what has been reported explicitly by almost a third of the company surveyed in 2024. There are also some specificities which are related to a company mostly dealing with domestic transactions and also deal with international transactions, so exporting companies. And usually exporters seem to be more likely to face late payment issues than the others. Now, one specific focus of the 2025 report was trying to understand the impacts. So one of the main concern about late payments is that it could actually hamper growth and investment. We know that late payments can affect liquidity, and liquidity is one of the elements that actually define the possibility to invest and to grow. And this is quite clear from the survey. As you can see in this chart, and basically business association in particular are voicing this concern that late payment is actually an obstacle to investment and growth, but also a factor that can lead companies to rely on external funding, financing, especially bank loans, among other issues. But of course, these are not the only impacts of late payments. We have highlighted three additional ones. One is access to finance. And basically almost 2/3 of companies facing late payments report struggling access to finance. And this sometimes leads to a sort of vicious circle whereby companies facing financing constraints also report late payments. So this points to the important need to break such vicious cycles. Another impact is the one which relates to administrative burden. And this year we had the possibility actually to put some numbers on this. I'm sure we'll discuss this point later also in the panel, is that companies seems to spend more than 1 day a week, full-time equivalent, in chasing late payments. And this is more or less the same for both large companies and small companies. And as you can imagine, this is really a considerable burden on SMEs especially. Last kind of impact, what we realize is that there is an increasing interest in trying to understand what is the size of the problem in the economy. And we have found several attempts actually to put a number on it. And basically, I'm sure we will discuss this because it's quite interesting in other webinars. But basically, what we try to do in the report is to put a number on the cash flow that is affected by late payment in the EU. And basically, we came up with an estimate of about 100 billion a year. I mean, this is quite large, and again, especially for small companies, which are typically the most affected. One last point before I close. In this year report, there was also another special focus on emerging technologies. So we are all faced with novelties when it comes to technologies, and this also affect payments, how we manage payments, but also late payments. And there are basically two angles, two ways we can look at the linkages between new technologies and late payments. One is, of course, payments, the way payments are made, and the second one is the management of payments. Concerning the first one, I think I really want to highlight that in the EU we have one of the best payment system of the world. I mean, it's one of the most efficient. I mean, we basically have instant payments. So if you really want to make a payment, basically the counterpart can receive it in matters of seconds, sometimes minutes. So the emergence of new technologies like blockchains can offer alternative. But to be honest, there is little room for improvement in the EU. I mean, in other regions of the world, this is a game changer. But I think in the EU, in a sense, the efficiency is already very high. But the possibility are increasing. What I find really interesting instead is the use of technology and in particular AI in the management of payments. And here actually the context is changing very fast and quite dramatically. Also because AI can help predict late payment, can detect mistakes, fraudulent transactions, so can really increase a lot the efficiency of companies in managing the payments and therefore contribute to the reduction of late payments. I think the main point here is to make sure that SMEs for which late payment is a problem are able to adopt these technologies and therefore improve their efficiency. My very last point relates to is quite broad and relates to the observatory. The observatory has been now in place for 3 years, and I think it has attracted a lot of attention and a lot of support in relation to the understanding of late payments, despite the views on the directive and the potential regulation. But one key element of the observatory is, of course, access to data. And unfortunately, despite the interest and the support, access to data is difficult and has a lot of limitation. So we are very much open to those who have ideas or have data and are willing to share their data to improve the capacity of the observatory to monitor the issue of late payments and to help addressing the problem. I will stop it here. Thank you very much for your attention and happy to discuss further these issues in a second part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for a very clear presentation. And indeed, the observatory is of an extremely important tool, and indeed relies on data. So we will need to explore other avenues there. But Cynthia has clearly showed that indeed public authorities and large companies are not setting the good example, and of course, taking into account the economic and geopolitical context that we live in. Late payments are still an issue, but indeed the consequences were very interesting. I mean, I retain, cross-border issues, investment and growth, survival, access to finance, administrative burdens, cash flow, and here numbers speaks for themselves. Indeed, 100 billion a year is something that can indeed be very impressive. So thank you so much, Cynthia. I do not see any questions online. So I suggest that we go now to our second part of the webinar today. We will then have a panel discussion. We are being joined by Ms. Anna Zabrotka-Averianov and Giacomo Fersini. Anna is a senior economist at Group Risk Analysis. And Anna joined the risk analysis team at Intrum as the senior economist in 2021. She has also been taking an active role in fulfilling Intrum's reporting requirements and cooperating closely with auditors. Anna has also been contributing to external publications such as bi-monthly Economy in Focus, as well as the key annual publications on late payments developments across Europe, the European Payment Report and European Consumer Payment Report. Prior to joining Intrum, Anna worked for 10 years as an economist at Moody's Analytics. Anna holds a master's in quantitative economics from Goethe University in Frankfurt and a bachelor's in economics and finance from Queen Mary University of London. Giacomo is a senior economic policy advisor, and he has been with Eurochambers, the European Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, since 2021. As the Senior Economic Policy Advisor, he coordinates the Economic Policy Committee on SME policy, including late payments, and dossiers linked to better regulation and simplification, industrial policy, and access to finance. He is also responsible for the empirical analysis and reports published by Eurochambers. Prior to this, Giacomo collaborated with United Nations as a research assistant on trade policy. He holds a double master's degrees in European economics from the University of Tübingen and University of Pavia. So Anna will give us some feedback on the annual report and on the shortest of data that was also mentioned by Cynthia. And Giacomo will then also focus on trends, potential solutions to the issues that have been raised by the report. And so I will leave them, I'll leave you with them. Anna, please, I think you will start.
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you very much to EU Observatory for inviting me to participate in this webinar. So I prepared a few slides because I thought since our European Payment Report has been one of the key sources for the EU's Observatory reports, I thought it would be interesting, first of all, to go over how we prepare our report and what exactly it contains. I hope you can see my slides. But first of all, let me introduce you to Intrum. Intrum is a European leading credit management service provider. We have around 9,000 employees across 20 European markets, and each day they help around 70,000 of our clients manage their payments on time, at the same time helping millions of individuals actually come back to financial resilience. And we have two publications each year. As Tanya mentioned in my bio, it's the European Payment Report, which focuses on the business side of payment behavior. And then we also have European Consumer Payment Report, which looks at individual consumers and their payment practices. And that report actually came out in November of last year. But specifically, EPR is the one that has been used by Observatory. It is a survey-based report. The data for that report has been collected from November 2024 until February 2025. We actually refer to it as European Payment Report of 2025, but the Observatory actually uses it as 2024 data, just to make sure that we're not confusing the years. We survey around 10,000 companies across 15 industries and across 25 European countries. The survey consists of around 25 questions, although some questions are have sub-questions underneath them because they're structured in the form of to what extent do you agree with the following statements, and they can be 4 or 5 statements underneath. But we do have some core questions, I would say, specifically focusing on the payment behavior, because we want to track them over time. So that, for example, was about the payment gap that you've seen presented by Cynthia. It's about, for example, the share of companies or the question whether the company has been forced to accept the kind of longer payment terms that they feel comfortable with. So those kind of questions remain over time for the last 4 or 5 years, so that we can track them and see how the payment trends are developing. But we do have a set of big pile of questions that do change over time, because the report also touches upon the broader economic landscape that the companies are finding themselves in, and also some key developments that we see, and that specifically over the last 2 years that has been, for example, AI. So we did change quite a few questions then to be able to add the AI developments in them. Not surprisingly, of course, the findings of our report are very much in line with what the EU Observatory report published as well. On the positive note, we do see that businesses are hungry for growth, especially after the COVID pandemic and the energy crisis, cost of living crisis. Last year, over 60% of businesses said that their priority is actually growth, which was the highest share that we had over the last 5 years that we started asking this question. At the same time, companies are struggling with actually survival. 1 in 4 indicated that if the economic situation does not improve meaningfully, they're at risk of going out of business. So there are those two things that need to be balanced and that are challenging for businesses. And of course, late payments do play quite a critical role in ensuring that they can grow and starve away the risk of bankruptcy. At the same time, as we've seen, unfortunately, payment behavior is not improving, or actually it's even deteriorating in some instances. We had over 30% of businesses saying that the payment situation has not improved much more since COVID pandemic, when we had those big issues with closures of businesses, etc. Also, increasing share of businesses said that they have been forced to accept longer payment terms in order to ensure that they don't damage the client-customer relationships. That was the highest share we had also in the 5 years that we collected this question, or in order to ensure that their customer does actually not go out of business. That was also one of the highest shares we had. At the same time, executives are frustrated because the economic situation has been slowly but nevertheless improving. So now we see that almost half of them said that they are actually rolling out stricter payment terms, and we've seen an increased share of businesses actually using the European Payment Directive. So definitely they're finding it useful. I think there was quite a significant increase in last year compared to 2024 report that we had in businesses admitting that they are using effectively the European Late Payment Directive. And the last thing, as I mentioned, of course, AI has been a hot topic for the last 2 years. So not surprising, we also started asking questions for businesses. And overall, we see a definitely big interest in using AI, specifically in payment management solutions. Over 90% of companies were saying that they already are using some AI solutions or they're planning to use them. But the application is still very much lagging behind. Only about 1 in 4 said that they already are effectively relying on AI interface, for example, to communicate with their clients about payments. So of course, as I mentioned, the European Payment Report that was used by EU Observatory is survey-based. So of course, these are self-reported data. They can be biased. We don't actually have a hard data points on transactions, which we can then verify. But nevertheless, we also try to kind of quantify what those payment behaviors and some of those shares actually mean. And actually, one of those statistics was presented by Cynthia that on average, the one on the very right, that on average the company spent almost 10 hours chasing late payments, and that actually equates to 71 days working days a year, which is quite a significant number when you think about it. When it comes to cost of labor, for example, right, that could be then used in a more efficient way. Around 11% of revenues are actually being paid late. And again, here was similar between SMEs and large corporations. And we did also try to quantify the amount of late payments in Europe. And it was kind of total receivables and loans, so not necessarily just late payments. In 2024, we were asking companies on average on what amount of money they're actually waiting in terms of receivables. And when we aggregated that by the number through the different industries, because of course the average was different across industries, across SMEs and big corporations. But when we kind of aggregated it by the number of corporations that we have in Europe, that number was staggering, was 10.5 trillion euros, which is kind of equivalent of GDP of UK, France, and Germany in 2024. So a big number of funds. Again, it's not all late payments. And of course, this is just kind of illustrational. So it's not hard data that this is the amount of late payments that we have in Europe. But nevertheless, it kind of gives an idea of that there is a big pile of funds that could definitely be used in much more efficient way and ensure that businesses are striving and growing strongly, especially as we mentioned that the economic situation is quite difficult. I mean, we've seen recovery, especially over the last 2 years since the COVID pandemic and the cost of living crisis. But nevertheless, the growth has been quite slow. And many businesses have been struggling, especially when you look at, for example, the bankruptcy statistics. I think just a couple of days ago we had the Q4 data point from the Eurostat. And the number of bankruptcies is a record high. There was a slight dip at the beginning of 2025, and unfortunately then the trend reversed and we see continued increases. And this is the question that I already mentioned, that we asked if the executives see their businesses at risk of going out of business if the situation does not improve. Not surprisingly, the SMEs are at higher risk. Almost 1 in 3 said that yes, they believe this is the case, and that was 11% for large corporations. And then again, when we extrapolated that just by multiplying by the number of active corporations within Europe, that is equated to almost 10 million businesses that employ around 40 million people, which is, equivalent to working age population of France. So again, this is a very big risk for businesses. And of course, late payments do play a critical role to ensure that those businesses do not go out of business. Sorry, I'm saying business a lot. But just to ensure, the growth in European economy continues, and we do see this stronger recovery, especially in the current economic environment with very high uncertainty. I think tackling the issue of late payments is becoming critical. So that's it from my side when it comes to the report. Back to you, Tanya.
Thank you so much, Anna, for all this very, very interesting data. It is indeed critical to tackle late payments. I mean, especially after you've mentioned, 10.5 trillion and 71 days to chase late payments. I mean, these are all numbers that speak for themselves. It was also very interesting to see how AI can be helpful, but it's still not being used to the fullest extent. So thank you so much. Intro is indeed a data set that is very, very useful for us. So thank you for this. And I will now give the floor to Giacomo for some introductory remarks as well. Giacomo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tanya, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today indeed, because it's very interesting to discuss the findings of the annual report of the EU Observatory, but also the results of Intrum are also quite striking. So overall, we appreciate the work that the observatory has been done over the years, and also we believe that indeed data and clear evidence is important when it comes to design policies, especially at the EU level, I would say. But I would like also to bring in the perspective of the policy perspective from the Eurochambers, the European Association of Chambers of Commerce. And I believe that we also need to be a bit careful when it comes to interpreting certain data. For example, generally speaking, there is sometimes the assumption that long payment terms are equal to late payments, when this is not exactly the same. Indeed, simply because having long payment periods does not signal automatically abuse of the payment practices. So we need to somehow nuance a bit the discussion when it comes to these long payment terms versus the late payments, especially when it comes to the B2B transaction. So conflating the two somehow risks oversimplifying a bit a much more complex reality on the ground. And Eurochambers has been stressing this for quite some time. But looking at the annual report of the observatory, what do the data tell us? You mentioned, Cinzia, that there is a 52% of your companies reporting facing issues linked to late payment in 2024. And this is indeed a considerable increase if you compare the results to the results of previous year. However, at the same time, the latest SAFE survey, which I understand also is somehow part of your analysis, and it's also coordinated by the ECB and the Commission, the last edition was published just last month, and suggested there has been an improvement into this data, this payment performance, which the 52% that you mentioned in 2025 is going down to 47%, which are the same levels that were registered in 2023, but also 2019. Among these 47%, only 14% of the companies experience regular issues with late payments, while only 33% of the companies experience late payment occasionally. Of course, I'm not saying that these numbers are negligible, but we have to put this into perspective as well. So overall, the SAFE survey, the survey published by the Commission and the ECB underlines that late payment remains a challenge, and that's something that we as Eurochambers fully acknowledge. However, the survey also reports that the main challenges for companies for SMEs especially, are different ones, and they are very much in line with what Eurochambers has been referring to with the Eurochambers Economic Survey, which is an annual survey that we carry out, and we published the results in November, where we identified that labor costs, access, lack of skilled workers, and regulatory burdens are the top challenges for companies. So, having said that, indeed, we must remain vigilant in the sense that indeed the work of the observatory is extremely useful in this regard to make sure that we track over time the developments linked to late payments. However, these trends, also the ones that was showed previously by Cinzia, suggest more, instead of a structural deterioration of the payment performance, might also suggest a certain economic stress cycles that companies are part of. Also, one of the slides previously presented also refers to the survey carried out by DG GROW during summer, and I'm not going to enter into the debate of payment caps when it comes to B2B and G2B payments, because indeed the position of Eurochambers has been always quite clear in this regard, and also chambers of commerce all over Europe are always telling us that indeed we fully support the commitment to tackle late payment, the issue of late payment. However, we believe that a strict payment cap would not fit the actual realities on the ground, the territorial differences, the sectorial differences, and so on. And this is something also that the annual report recognizes and acknowledges, that national and sectorial differences matter, and the payment performance across countries and sector differs greatly. So you have the retail sector, for example, which of course, as you know, relies sometimes on long payment terms because of the very nature of the products that are sold by these companies, but also the niche product, the seasonal sales cycles, and so on. On the other hand, you have other sectors such as constructions and healthcare. As you know, these two sectors are quite a bit on the spot because they suffer from chronic late payment in certain cases, but they're also linked to structural difficulties and complexities of the sector themselves, such as the verification periods, the supply chains that they actually are made of. So, and also another important aspect is that these two sectors, and I took construction and healthcare as an example, they're very much dependent on government contracts, and this is also where the annual report provides very interesting results. That indeed I find it particularly striking that B2B payment has been improving while G2B payment is actually getting worse. So it's not even as bad as in the previous years, but it's actually getting worse. And you know better than me also what the current directive also says in this regard. You have recital 6 and 23, which reminds us that indeed public governments, they have a special responsibility, also because they benefit from more secure and predictable revenue streams when it comes to issuing new contracts or making payments. So the Commission also has been doing a lot in this regard. You know, you have all the enforcement action, but also the judgments from the Court of Justice against some certain member states which are not compliant. However, we see that governments still do not lead by example, and this is also something that that particularly affect companies in the supply chain. And of course, if you work on public procurement, you are also very well familiar with the challenges that SMEs face in this sector. You have, for instance, the main contractor which cannot pay the subcontractor which cannot pay the supplier, and so on. So, and SMEs in this dimension, the SME dimension in this context is particularly relevant because, of course, SMEs have also a territorial rooted into the territories, into the communities, and if they cannot pay their employees, of course, this adds further pressure on their investment capacity, but also to the public finances as well overall. So, ensuring timely G2B payment might be, in our opinion, one of the most effective ways to mitigate this sort of domino effect, this cascading effect. So when it comes to the solutions or how to move forward, and it was already mentioned by the previous speakers that AI, of course, is playing and will play an important role, but we need to focus, instead of primarily changing the rules or imposing strict caps, we need to focus more on monitoring, transparency, and enforcement of the current rules. what to do in this regard. Mandatory publication and comparability of G2B payment data, performance data would be very useful. Cinzia already referred to the issue of gathering this information, and indeed monitoring at the central, regional, and local government levels would definitely be useful. Automatic payments of flat fee compensation or interest rate when it comes to government paying late would also be useful. And it was also mentioned instant payment, electronic invoicing, and the wider process of digitalization. Of course, electronic invoicing will not change the culture behind late payment. This is why, indeed, combined with digital tools and AI-based monitoring, it can at least partially reduce the administrative burden of chasing late payers and shorten the verification processes, but also provide better data for policymakers. So, last point is that SMEs also are confronted with issues linked to credit management and financial literacy more broadly. So, and this is where also a cultural shift is also needed, meaning that financial literacy should be included into entrepreneurship education and lifelong strategies more pragmatically. So just to conclude, indeed, that Eurochambers thinks that indeed there is a need to change the culture when it comes to the payment, time of payment, but indeed the culture will be changed through transparency, incentives, and accountability. I will leave it there. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you very much, Giacomo, for your views and this very interesting exchange. Indeed, we hear that late payment is a challenge, but there are also other challenges. I think we'll agree on this, including regulatory burden that need to be addressed. We also, there's been a debate about the strict payment cap, and 23. The survey done by the European Commission also shows that 23% also think that there should be a sector-specific flexibility, and this was also something that has been proposed by the Parliament in their first reading almost 3 years ago now. But indeed, there is a need to change the culture, and transparency is key to that. That is for certain. So thank you very much. I've been checking a bit. We've received some questions that I might actually address some of them directly. Two of them are regarding the late payment directive and where we are.
Tanya, sorry.
Yes.
Tanya, excuse me.
Tell me.
Can I quickly react to Giacomo's presentation, or maybe just on 2 points, if you don't mind? Just
Sure.
So, Giacomo, I would like to, first of all, thanks for highlighting the new safe data and to point to the fact that actually the situation is improving. I think this is actually something that makes us happy. And I want to reinforce what you mentioned about the cyclical component. We know that, for instance, in 2025, GDP growth has been revised upwards a couple of times because the situation in the end was better than expected, because there was a lot of concern, but actually the economy has kept growing. And I think this is what we see also in this number. So I think that the cyclical element is important and it needs to be recognized. Now let's see what will come with the other data. The global situation, unfortunately, is not getting any better. Another point: payment terms and payment times. I can't agree more that these are two different things. It's clear. Now, still the importance that is given to the time duration, to the period, relates to the fact that if I'm selling you something and basically we agree that you will pay me in 60 days or maybe in 90 days because I do not have the negotiating power to reduce this time, this is still an issue. Okay, and when I mentioned these attempts to estimate the cash flow impact, it really tends to capture this, not related to duration, but to late payment. The fact that basically those who are paid late are basically offering credit for free. So this is basically why this is an issue in the economy. Then there are a lot of sectoral specificities. This is very well understood, but I think we really need to recognize what is the inherent meaning of having late payments for those who basically deliver the service, deliver the goods, but are paid with a lot of delay. A very last word on G2B versus B2B. This is a big problem, but maybe some positive development that somehow we are seeing is that. I'm not saying that it's because we have the European Observatory, but now in some countries we are seeing national payment observatory being created. And this, I think, is a major step forward, because this will really allow us to get a better understanding of what happens at national level. And I would also have the expectation that access to data, both business to business, but especially government to business, may become more available. And when data are available, there is pressure. So I think this is a positive development. I really hope that more member states will undertake this way. Now, this is, as far as I know, it's the case of France and Spain, or Spain as a new observatory being in the process of set it up. So just to highlight these points. But many thanks for sharing your views. Tanya, back to you.
Thank you very much, Cinzia, for these replies. I think it provides very insightful information about the topics that were mentioned by Giacomo. And if I may, indeed, I think transparency, as I said, is a very good development, and we should strive to continue doing that. Observatories in all member states should be very welcome. But if I may also, in terms of, before we go to the questions, in terms of the late and long payment terms, Giacomo, indeed, even long payment terms, as Cinzia was saying, do not contribute to healthy cash flows because they're still long. So, the problem is still there. But now let me just, address, there were a couple of questions about the legislative process on late payments by the Commission. And just, I don't think this should be the focus of the discussion, but just to put it out there. As you know, the Commission has proposed a new regulation with strict payment terms also for B2B. This has been, object of the first reading by the Parliament almost 3 years ago. It was a favorable reading that even went beyond what we have proposed in some of the topics, but now it has been in discussions in Council and quite blocked since a while. The Commission is ready to find a compromise with the Member States, and we will see how to push this forward. But this, I hope I've replied to a couple of questions regarding this. I will also, in terms of logistics, I will also ask the people who are asking questions to please identify yourselves when you are doing so in the chat. Now we have a couple of other questions. Have we identified solutions or best practices that drastically reduce the payment terms, and will e-invoicing play a role in that regard? I think both Cinzia, I think all of the presentators today have actually touched upon e-invoicing. So I'll leave it up to you. I don't know who wishes to take this question. Maybe Anna or Cinzia. Cinzia, please go ahead.
I can start and then happy to hand over. Of course, on e-invoicing was mentioned. For those who are interested, by the way, last year we published an in-depth study on this, and the main finding is that indeed it can actually help companies in improving their efficiency. But it doesn't solve the culture problem. So if you don't want to pay on time, e-invoicing will not address the problem. But for companies, especially small companies, which maybe struggle to handle their invoices, actually this is a major change. And we are going to see a much larger use of e-invoicing also in view of the changes in the regulatory framework, like ViDA. So for those in Belgium, or the Belgian administration, for instance, has now in place the invoicing system. The purpose is essentially in the context of taxation systems, but still this is a push towards e-invoicing. Now, I mean, of course, again, in all the studies which have been publishing through the years and all available on the website of the observatory, we have tried to tackle different reasons for late payments, but also potential tools, among which, for instance, the possibility of sanction systems that have been adopted by some countries, but fundamentally the culture is actually a key element. Maybe Anna wants to complement this.
Yes, thank you, Cinzia. Indeed, we need a cultural shift, and invoicing to play a part on that. Maybe Anna would like to complement. Yes.
So I wanted to, I mean, it goes a little bit outside of the scope of this report, because when we, it was more for B2C transactions, so business to clients, from our European consumer payment report, which was actually quite interesting, finding that first reason why the customers were paying their invoices late was, first of all, because they lacked the funds, but the second reason was because they forgot. So I think technology here does play quite a critical role to ensure that the payments are being made, because we can have those automatic reminders to people. They can very easily just do it on their phone. So I think technology definitely will improve the payment management quite substantially. But of course, as you said, it is still a matter of culture. So unfortunately, here technology can only take us thus far. And I think, as Giacomo mentioned, I think financial literacy is quite important to ensure that there is this shift in culture, why paying on time is actually important for people, to understand the workings of the economy, on the supply chains, how they work. I think that is something that's quite critical in ensuring that we see this shift in culture. And of course, it will take time. It's not something that can be fixed easily.
Thank you very much. Indeed, time is a difficult concept, and we are asked to be more and more fast in every area. Thank you very much, both Anna and Cinzia. We now have a question for Giacomo, which links to the discussion we were having on the long payment terms. So Anders Persson from Sweden asked, Giacomo, how should we separate the legitimate need for efficient transaction processing from a situation where payment terms effectively force suppliers to provide financing? Our assessment is that long payment terms do the most harm to the market by tying up working capital and weakening competitiveness. In other words, at what point does a settlement period stop being about completing the transaction and becoming de facto customer financing, a bit what Cinzia was saying, as a loan or credit? Giacomo, please.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Well, at what moment this becomes an abuse of the contractual freedom or not? That's an interesting point. But generally speaking, I think that, of course, we are talking about the contractual freedom as a key element of entrepreneurship, a key principle of entrepreneurship. However, this needs to be on the one hand guaranteed, but also has to be fair. So it has to be fair for both economic operators that are in the transaction. So there is, I always think that advising before sanctioning is a good approach. And in this regard, mediation can also be a good solution to facilitate the process of paying on time. And indeed, chambers of commerce have been working on this, supporting companies, smaller companies, in mediation activities when it comes to making sure that invoices are paid on time. So there is not a silver bullet here in understanding what is when the moment when this becomes abuse or not. But also, I already mentioned in other situations a personal experience with my father's company. He has a small company in the south of Italy, working in the textile sector, and he's been running this company for over 30 years. Of course, he knows his suppliers. He knows very well since 20, 30 years, because they have been supplying raw materials and so on. And in this regard, imposing on them a strict payment cap or limiting their contractual freedom, the possibility of them to bilaterally agree on what are the payment times periods, it's something that doesn't really doesn't match with the I would say with the relationship that has been created over the years. So we are talking about entrepreneurship in local and regions where these relations between the customer and the supplier, they have been developed over the years with trust. So here it's where the contractual freedom becomes a key element of entrepreneurship, and limiting it with a strict cap will not do any favor to anybody.
Thank you so much, Giacomo. I think it should also be borne in mind that contractual freedom only exists when two companies are in the same level, which sometimes does not happen when there's an SME. But we have time. We have 2 minutes to reply to the last question. What do you think are the main reasons for late payment culture? Is it inability to have financial management? Anna, Cinzia, Giacomo, key words on 2 minutes if anyone has any contribution.
I think maybe I'll just one sentence, a little bit reiterating what we said already before. I think kind of lack of good payment management could be a quite important reason. And again, I think here technology can definitely improve the situation. The other one is probably habit, and as we said, culture.
Yes.
So this is something that will be much more difficult to tackle through legislation potentially, but I think also through financial literacy. So
Yeah, maybe
this is only that I have to add.
just to complement Anna, I think if you have been in a certain practice for many years, maybe just to build on what Giacomo was saying, if you operate in an environment where everyone pays late, you are going to pay late. And maybe you're not even aware of how problematic this is until actually everyone starts to speak about it and you realize, oh, well, actually I may have a problem related to liquidity, or I have been adapting to a certain situation with cost for years, and actually I could improve my situation. But having worked in a cultural environment, but also in a business environment where everyone pays late, I think increases a lot the probability of continuing paying late.
And if
Thank
I may
you very
also
much.
complement
Yes.
with this,
Very
just
quickly.
one word concerning the broader economic framework. As you well know, the late payment gets worse when economic growth slows down. So it's not only about, I fully agree that indeed it's a matter of habit, but it's also there are many other external factors which contribute to some extent into this trend.
Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you all for having participated in this session. I think it was very informative, very interesting. We've talked about culture shift, the importance of technology, AI, e-invoicing. I think we'll agree that there is issues with late payments, and we need to address them. So I think this brainstorm is very interesting, and data is also of crucial importance. So I'd like to thank you, all of you, the speakers for their active participation and inputs, and for all of you that have participated and have asked their questions. Thank you very much. And the materials will be shared, indeed, as some people are asking. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.